The good news about nuclear destruction, a bit of a perversive title. What we did was, this is actually an article from 2006. It was in WorldNet Daily. It was a 2-page article at the time. And since that time, we've continued to expand it. It's a 4-page article now, and we've tweaked it and tried to go ahead and make sure that we were spot on with it. And in a nutshell, what the good news is that nuclear disaster, nuclear weapons, if and when we ever see them, they're much more survivable than the general public thinks. And we're trying to get through to people to go ahead and get civil defense training turned back on by the federal government. And what we're going to show today is that 90% of the potential casualties from a nuclear event are 100% avoidable if those affected populations had been taught beforehand in what to do and not do. And it's not about buying a lot of radiation instruments or $300,000 bunker or any of these things. It's simple things from the first instant of a nuclear flash. If you know what to do, and I'll just give it to you up front and we'll show how it works. It's simply duck and cover, which we've all heard of before, and on the other side of it, it's to shelter in place while the radioactive fallout loses its intensity very quickly. And these things aren't taught, and the challenge that we've had is that most people are of the opinion that if anything nuclear happens, everybody's going to die, or it'll be so bad you wish you had. And you can walk out of this room and do a random survey of 20 people. Just ask them, what would you do if suddenly there was a bright flash on the other side of town and you knew it was a nuclear disaster, it was a nuclear bomb just went off, what would you do? And 19 out of 20 people, if not all 20, are going to give you some version of bend over and kiss my butt goodbye. And that's the starting attitude that we have with people, is that they think that it's absolutely futile to think that you could do anything to survive a nuke. And with that attitude, they're not open to the solutions that we're trying to present here and we're trying to get across to people. I'd like to, let's see how we do this. And what we've tried to do is, we have a business. We sell radiation equipment. We're the only private radiation calibration lab in the country, non-government lab that recalibrates all of the old civil defense equipment. And we have over 100,000 of those pieces. And we also develop new products as well for civil defense. But what that does is it funds our evangelism to try to get the word out. And we've spent thousands of dollars online with banner ads on the top of the Drudge Report and doing things like this. This is a billboard in Salt Lake City. And it's not so much to get the public. See, the good news nuke will take them to this article we're talking about. It's not so much to hit the public directly with this, but we're trying to get the media to cover it. And that's part of the reason for, again, the good news about nuclear destruction being such a provocative title. Because of people's attitudes that you can't survive nukes, they're aghast that we would dare say such a thing. And it attracts them to it. So we're hoping at some point that we can get the media to cover it. And if they can, they would do it with a picture, and that picture then would include that URL so that we would get traffic there. And that's the goal if we can do that. It's not to change people's minds one at a time, but it's to try to get that media coverage. It's probably going to take some sort of nuclear scare in the country again before we're going to have the media take a look at us that much. We've been blessed by Jane and Art and Steve Jones and DDP and you know, for 20 years supporting us in our efforts, and I very much applaud and thank you for that. And I would also like to add that another mentor of ours has been Dr. Alan Brodsky, who passed away just a few months ago. He's been to our lab a couple of times in Texas, spent a couple of days with us, and we were in communication with him right up until a month before his passing, and he vetted all of our materials, and he was a huge supporter of civil defense, and he wanted to get it turned back on too. And we very much, I just want to acknowledge him and what he did, and how much he supported everything we're trying to do here. In fact, one of his last books in 2016, he thought so much of the Good News article, which is our primary document out of half a dozen instruction pieces that we have, that he included it as the afterword in that book that he wrote. So, tragically, the biggest problem that we have is most Americans won't give credence to this good news. And they're absolutely, I mean, it's appalling how many people you'll talk to. And I give you, this is crazy. We have dealers that sell our products, and some of them are preppers personally. They're prepped for everything. And I get talking to them about different stuff, and I found out that some of them selling our products for 20 years don't believe they could survive nukes themselves. And I get talking to them, and I find out that they look at nukes, like a lot of people do, as some asteroid hitting the Earth that killed all the dinosaurs. In other words, there is no surviving it. They've prepared for everything you could think of except for nukes. They are in the same camp as the general public. It is that pervasive. And what we've had happen, well, first let me tell you real quick. Toshi Kanu spoke last year at this event, and he is the last closest to ground zero Hiroshima survivor. And we got talking to him a couple years ago, and he saw what we were doing, and he recognized that most of the casualties they had in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were because the people were unfamiliar with the unique effects of a nuclear bomb. We've got a flash, we've got a delayed blast, and we've got radiation later. And what happened was, people not knowing anything about duck and cover, they have this unique flash in the sky that no one had ever seen before. And what did they do? They all rushed outside to see the source of this bright flash that just happened, or they ran to the nearest window, and they all got there just in time for the delayed blast wave to go ahead and shred them. And that is what happens. Toshi's concern with what he saw there is that he now lives in Salt Lake City, and he sees the same thing amongst the American people. He sees the same level of, I don't want to say ignorance, but just lack of knowledge of what you're up against. And he's concerned that the American people are no better than the people were in Hiroshima the day before the nuke went off, as far as knowing what to do. I mean, that is a tragic thing that we're in that state. But it's even worse. I'll take it another step. The American people aren't ignorant of the effects of a nuke and how to protect themselves. They're just the opposite. They're closed-minded. They think they already know. And they believe, and again, you can do this survey, you can do it anywhere in your own town. The majority of people think that if any nukes are unleashed, everybody's going to die, or it'll be so bad you wish you had. And that's the starting point. And with that closed mind, those people are not open to hearing what you're hearing today, and they're certainly not going to be seeking it out. And that's our job, to try to get through that. And ideally, the government, our whole push is that the government needs to turn back on civil defense of the people. We're not asking for billions of dollars for, provisioned fallout shelters for everybody like the politicians have. We're not even asking for that. All we're asking for is education to go ahead and teach the people simply duck and cover with any bright flash, and then go ahead and shelter in place. And we'll explain for how briefly you have to do that. And again, you can do this without an awful lot of money involved in it or anything. This defeatist attitude that we're dealing with has been born of 65 to 70 years of the disarmament, anti-nuke, ban the bomb crowd. They have ridiculed anything that threatened their agenda of ban the bomb. They didn't want you to think that any kind of civil defense would have any utility for you. And we're to the point now where people look at scenes like this and they feel, oh, how naive we were back then to think that would save you. Well, look, if you're at ground zero, it's not going to. But 90% of the people that are at risk are further out in the blast zone where it would. Because what's going to happen is without this, you're going to have all the kids, and I have kids, I got grandkids, they're going to run to the nearest window with that bright flash. I mean, it's going to be an impulsive run to that window, and they're going to get there just in time for that delayed blast wave to shred them. And that is exactly what's going to happen if we fail to get this message out. I mean, we're looking at 90% of the casualties are further out in that survivable zone that if they duck and covered, they can avoid having that happen. And it's just absolutely tragic. But I mean, they've been incredibly effective through academia, through government, through business, and especially the movies. Everybody thinks that if any nukes get unleashed, everybody's going to die or it'll be so bad you wish you had. These people are not open to hearing this message, and they're certainly not looking for it. And again, the loss of life is just going to be incredible because of that. The biggest surprise for most Americans from the first flash of a nuke being unleashed is that they're still going to be here. But they're not going to be equipped to survive for very long. For instance, many could readily survive the delayed blast wave via the old duck and cover tactic, and that is very good news if they knew to do it as quick as the flash appeared. Unfortunately, most don't. And even fewer know how to later survive the coming radioactive fallout, which could eventually kill many times more than the blast. However, there is still more good news possible, as well over 90% of those potential casualties from fallout are avoidable too if the public was pre-trained through an aggressive national civil defense educational program. Simple measures taken immediately after a nuclear detonation by a pre-trained public can prevent agonizing death and injury from radiation exposure. Now, the government went ahead and did the national planning scenario number 1. It was originally a confidential internal 2004 study by the Department of Homeland Security. It got leaked, and then they went ahead and published it. It examined the effects of a terrorist nuke detonated in Washington, D.C. Now, what I'm talking about here would be applicable to any city, but just for Washington, D.C., they discovered that a 10-kiloton nuke, about 2/3 the size of the Hiroshima bomb, detonated at ground level would result in about 15,000 immediate deaths and another 15,000 casualties from the blast, thermal flash, and initial radiation release. Now, as horrific as those numbers are, and even without duck and cover, the surprising revelation here is that over 99% of the residents of the DC area would have just witnessed and survived their first nuclear explosion. Clearly, the good news is that most people would survive the initial blast. People need to understand that. But the sobering news is that we could very quickly, from that example, have another 250,000 people that would be at risk from the radioactive fallout headed towards them, depending on which way the wind was going for the different population areas that are there. But there's still some good news if those people were trained not to try to jump in their car, create this huge traffic jam where now they're exposed outside. If they would go ahead and just stay put and stay inside, for the vast majority of people, I mean, they just need to stay home, and if they still have electricity, watch it on TV. They don't need to get out there and clog up the roads. And when you have fallout, the wind's going to blow it in one direction. You're looking at maybe an eighth of the compass rose. Downwind, it's a pizza slice, ever widening and dispersing. Those are the people that most have to stay in home. All the rest of the people around here, they just need to keep the roads clear and stay off. It's not even coming towards them. Okay, so the fallout, you know, if you're 20 miles away from the blast zone or 40 miles away from the blast zone, you just need to stay home. Odds are the fallout's not even coming towards you. But you don't want to get in the car and get, do another Houston hurricane run where you get to spend 2 days out on the highway. That's where you're going to get most exposed. The radioactive fallout is most dangerous early on, and we'll go ahead and show that coming up here too. Also, too, another study released in August 2008 by the RAND Corporation looked at a terrorist 10-kiloton nuke arriving in a cargo container and being exploded in the port of Long Beach, California. Over 150,000 people were estimated to be at risk downwind from fallout, again, many times more than from the initial blast itself. And see, most people think that if we have fallout, everything's contaminated forever, and you know, it just doesn't work that way. If it's a ground burst and it's in close, that area could be a Chernobyl for 5 miles forever, yes. But further out, for the rest of the people, where the bulk of the people are, it's a matter of the first couple of days you have to be in a protective mode while the fallout loses its intensity very quickly. And again, the good news here, that these much larger numbers from radioactive fallout are largely avoidable too, but it only applies to those that have been pre-trained beforehand in what to do. This is not news that we're going to be able to educate people about when it happens. You certainly aren't going to be able to educate them about duck and cover before that happens. I mean, you have to do it before it happens, because when the flash happens, you've only got seconds to hit the deck. And by the way, when we talk about hitting the deck, even if you got caught out in the open, simply laying flat on the ground cuts by 8-fold the possibility of you being hit by any projectile or being picked up and becoming a projectile. So you treat this like a tornado. When the blast wave comes through, you're looking at 3 seconds further out in the blast wave. When the wind is lower, it'll be 4 or 5 seconds, but up close where it's really strong, tornado strength, all the way up to 300 mile an hour, you're looking at a 2.8 second blast of wind. And you treat it like a tornado. And you don't run to the nearest window to see what the bright flash was to be shredded by that coming in at you. Let me see. I think everybody remembers this in Russia. So they have this meteor. It's causing quite a brightness, and what people were impulsively doing was running to the nearest window to see, what this was, what is going on. And over 1,500 people were injured from the delayed shock wave exploding inward the window glass they were all scanning the winter sky with. And and this is what we're talking about. So this is a quote from one report here. A 4th grade teacher in Chelyabinsk, Yulia Karbasheva, was hailed as a hero after saving 44 children from imploding window glass cuts. Despite not knowing the origin of the intense flash of light, Karbasheva thought it prudent to make precautionary measures by ordering her students to stay away from the room's windows and to perform a duck and cover maneuver. Karabisheva, who remained standing, was severely lacerated when the blast arrived, and window glass severed a tendon in one of her arms. However, none of her students, whom she ordered to hide under their desks, suffered any cuts. So duck and cover, while underappreciated by most Americans, it's been shown to be simple and effective. And even as early, from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we understood that duck and cover was extremely effective. According to the 1946 book Hiroshima, and this is incredible, in the days between Hiroshima and Nagasaki, atomic bombings in Japan, one Hiroshima policeman, after having survived the Hiroshima bombing, went to Nagasaki to teach the police about ducking after the atomic flash. As a result of this timely warning, not a single Nagasaki policeman died in the initial blast. Unfortunately, the general public was not warned of the heat blast danger following an atomic flash because of the bomb's unknown nature. Many people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki died while searching the skies for the source of the brilliant flash. I mean, this is so easy. And everybody, your children at school, everybody at work, everybody at home, if they don't know to duck and cover when there's an incredibly bright flash that's lighting up everything around them, if they don't know to hit the deck for 2 minutes, they're going to be running to the nearest window to see what it is, and they are running into the face of a 300-mile-per-hour tornado that's going to last 3 seconds. And it's such a it's going to be such a loss of life that's, it's so easily avoidable. It's so tragic. And this could be taught. Anyways, Robert Trumbull, the New York Times Pacific and Asia War correspondent, he wrote a book in '57, 9 Who Survived Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Personal Experiences. Let me see, I got this picture up here. Personal experiences of 9 men who lived through both atomic bombings. Talk about tough luck. You evacuate Hiroshima and you go to another town and you get there just in time 2 days later for the next bombing. Here's 2 stories. Satomi Yamaguchi, 29, Mitsubishi ship designer. And by the way, the Nagasaki military target for us was the Mitsubishi headquarters. Anyways, this fella, he's 29, Mitsubishi ship designer, who, by the way, who only died in 2010, age 93. This is a quote out of the book. Suddenly, and he's talking initially about Hiroshima, suddenly there was a flash like the lighting of a huge magnesium flare, Yamaguchi recalls. The young ship designer was so well drilled in air raid precaution techniques that he reacted automatically. He flung his hands to his head, covering his eyes with his fingers and stopping his ears with his 2 thumbs. Simultaneously, he dropped to the ground face down. He said, "As I prostrated myself, there came a terrific explosion. The left side of his face and arm facing the fireball were burned, and he returned to Nagasaki, experiencing the second nuclear explosion on the 6th floor of the headquarters office of Mitsubishi. When he got there, and before that Nagasaki bomb went off, spelling out the danger of flying glass, he urged his fellow workers to keep windows open during any air raid alert, and at the instant of the flash, to seize at once upon any shelter available. The second A-bomb confirmed young Yamaguchi's words, exploding in a huge ball of fire about a mile away. Yamaguchi's lecture, just an hour earlier, was not lost upon his colleagues. With the young designer's words still fresh in their minds, they leaped for the cover of desks and tables. As a result, said Yamaguchi, my section staff suffered the least in that building. In other sections, there was a heavy toll of serious injuries from flying glass. And then the second story, Masu Kamutsu, 40, was hit by a falling beam in a Hiroshima warehouse and was on board a train in Nagasaki when the bomb fell. Quote, The interior of the coach was bathed in a stark white light. Kametsu immediately dived for the floor. "Get down," he screamed at the other passengers. Some recovered sufficiently from the daze of the blinding light to react promptly to his warning. Seconds later came the deafening crack of the blast and a shock wave that splintered all the windows on both sides of the train. The passengers who had not dived under the seats were slashed mercilessly from waist to head by glass flying at bullet speed. So obviously, duck and cover with any bright flash. Tell your kids, tell your grandkids. And also with this document at goodnewsnuke.com, try to get that to your teachers, emergency managers at your local town, goodnewsnuke.com, and try to share this information with them. And a lot of times, you might, if you don't get a good response, if they're not really receptive to it, be prepared that for a lot of this stuff, it's going to require something to have happened in the world nuclear, and to where this ends up being news on the top of the fold. And we've got a lot of opportunities for that to happen, unfortunately. And top of my list is India, Pakistan, and China, that corner right there. And of course, we've got Iran and North Korea, and Russia and China and all the gang. But and there's a lot of people that are trying to do something, as far as terrorist nukes and whatnot. So inevitably, it's going to come back up, and when it does, you're going to have people that are going to be more receptive then to taking a look at this information. And it's so easy to go ahead and have teachers simply be instructed to make sure that they can corral their kids and not let them impulsively rush to the window. It could make such a huge, huge difference. Well, terrorist nukes will likely be smaller than the Hiroshima bomb, which was 16 KT. In a modern superpower conflict today, the nukes are going to be larger. Most of them are going to be in the 100 to 500 KT range. Yes, we've got bigger, we've got smaller, but most of them are in that neighborhood. And the reason they're a little bit smaller is the targeting is so much better. The being able to micronize everything is smaller. They're able to get a bigger bang in a smaller package, et cetera. So most of the weapons are going to be in that neighborhood. So let's look at the top end of it, and that would be the 500 KT. If you can see the 2.2 mile marker on there, the middle button, is it the middle button? Isn't that it right there? Yeah. Okay. That's also the 10 psi overpressure area, and that's the area that 10 psi or higher. That's really the ground zero, or the too close to ground zero to survive if you're outside and above the ground. Okay, so obviously nuclear weapons are horrific, et cetera, but the actual unsurvivable area, and we could lose thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. But when you look at this, the blast zone goes much further than the area of total destruction. And at that 2.2 mile marker, you have the flash happen. At the 2.2 mile marker, it's going to be 8 seconds before the blast wave arrives. You have no excuse to get below the height of windows or to hit the deck somewhere wherever you are, unless you're on a boat or a farmer out in the middle of a field. But even then, you need to be able to go ahead and hit the deck immediately. Now, for all of the, for even further out, you're talking about even more time, out to 20 seconds. So you do not have an excuse to not try to avoid the coming blast wave, okay? And if the population is evenly distributed over this area, what we're looking at is that the area where you're going to have casualties and fatalities is actually, that's where we get the 90% number from. There's actually there's 15 times more people outside of the area of total unsurvivable destruction at ground zero, inside of that 2.2 miles. And remember, we're picking the bigger bomb here too. You know, at the 500 KT. Just, you know, we didn't want anybody to say we're being too conservative. But you're looking at 15 times more people outside the area of total destruction that if they will duck and cover, they have a great chance of surviving this. But if they're going to impulsively do what most untrained people are going to do, running to the nearest window to see what that bright flash was, they're going to catch that 300-mile-an-hour blast right in the face. By the way, it's just under 300 miles per hour at the 2.2 marker, and that is for 2.8 seconds the duration. That wind, by the time you get to the furthest part, the 1 psi, it's down to just 35 miles per hour. So I mean, it drops very quickly. And you're also looking down there, it taking like 5 or 6 seconds at 35 miles per hour. So it drops, the gradient is very quick. But duck and cover is what it's all about. Okay. This just shows a little bit more. This ties into the same chart that you just saw before. By the way, links, the Good News article doesn't have all these pictures. But all of these pictures are linked at the bottom of that article. So you get it, if you end up going to goodnewsnuke.com, you're going to end up being able to re-access all of these different documents. And these come from Fema Publications. These are not things that I created. But it's showing that 10 psi number and why you want to be ducking covering for anything to the right of that. And the other big part of it, so we survived, we duck and covered and we survived, and now we've got this big mushroom cloud over us, and we're going to have this fallout coming. Now, again, the fallout is going to be going out in a thin pizza slice that at most is going to be 1/8 of the compass rose, whichever way the wind is blowing it. So if you're the unlucky one and you're underneath that, what you're going to be having, for instance, I mean, you know, it could be a higher intensity, but the important thing on this chart is the 7-10 rule. And what's happening is that even 1 hour afterwards, if it's 1,000 Roentgen per hour, that would, if you're out in that, that's a fatal dose in about 35 minutes. You're not going to fall over dead, but that's one of those things where you wish you could, because you're next week and a half, your history. That's about 35 minutes, you would be dead. What's fascinating is the radioactive fallout is dangerous because it's giving off so much energy, which also means it gets weak very quickly. And as you can all see with this chart, in 7 hours, it's only 1/10 of 1,000. Now it's down to 100 Roentgen per hour. And that's how quickly it drops. And if you can shelter in place, even just for the first 7 hours of this. And by the way, when fallout starts falling, even if you don't have an instrument, if you have a white sedan or a white paper or a white windowsill, fallout is aptly named fallout because it falls out. It's big and heavy enough. It's going to be like little black and brown granules of sand. You're going to actually see it on a white surface. So even if you don't have an instrument, but you've seen the mushroom cloud, you see the anvils blowing towards you, and now you start seeing some of this dust showing up, you need to hunker down. The hunkering down time has commenced. Once it starts falling, usually all that will fall in about an hour. So once it does start, the peak of it is going to be within about an hour. You're going to be at your maximum amount of intensity for your area right there. And if you had an instrument, you could actually see it falling off this dramatically. So in 7 hours, it's only 1/10 as lethal as it was initially. In another 7-fold increase in time, roughly 2 days, it drops down again, and you've dropped it down to 1/100th of what we'd started with originally. Okay? So ideally, what you would be looking at doing if you're in an area of the fallout is you want to be able to hunker down for 2 to 3 days. And this can be done without a $30,000 bunker or real fancy setup. And again, for a lot of people, for 7/8 of those people all the way around, the fallout didn't even come towards them. Okay, it's just for the people in the pizza slice that the wind blew it down to them. So this just gives you an idea, a rough idea. Again, these are all from old FEMA documents. What we're doing, when we're dealing with radioactive fallout, we want to increase our distance from it, and we also want to try to put some mass between it and us to attenuate or absorb it, because it's going to be on the roof, it's going to be on the trees, it's going to be on the ground. And we want to try to get some distance from it. And the interesting thing about the distance is if you're looking at, if this is a 6-inch wall here, and on the outside is the fallout, and here you are inside, and it's 2 feet from here to here, and if the radiation is 100 Roentgen per hour right here, if you could measure it, if you could take this 2 feet and just double the distance to 4, this reading is now going to be 25 Roentgen. So the distance really makes a big difference. You want to get in the middle of your house. If you have a basement, you go to a basement in a corner because now you got earth on that corner. But if you don't have a basement, you want to get to the middle of whatever structure you have to work with, as far away from the outside walls as possible. It'd be good to have plastic, duct tape, because if you suffered any broken windows with the blast wave, you want to make sure you don't have the fallout blowing inside. We've defeated the purpose of the distance. So, that would be good to have as well. How are we doing time-wise?
Let's see. You've been talking for 38 minutes, so you have 22 left.
Okay. It's tough after a big Mexican lunch, isn't it?
You leave time for questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So anyways, just a few more ideas on what you can do at the house. Crescent Kearney has an excellent video out there of doing this in his own home. He's taking cardboard boxes, he's filling them up with dirt, he's just piling them around. We're making mass. It's unbelievable how well you can attenuate the radiation that's outside. And it's this simple. You want to pile it up around you and above you. Now, what you're looking at here is somebody in a basement, and they're in a corner, and the earth on the outside is above the height of the table that they're going to get under. Look, I understand it's going to be cramped and uncomfortable, to be under here for a couple days, okay? But you can do it. And even if you could only do it for 1 day, then throw a bed mattress or something in there so at least you sleep in it the next night. That would protect you, even more for those 8 hours. So this is the kind of thing that anybody can do, and you could do it very quickly too if you didn't have much time to go ahead and put it together. Is that right side up? Yeah. So that's just more of it. You're just, anything with weight, anything that's heavy will do the job. Lead is nothing special. Pound for pound, it's the same as feathers. It's just that this much lead and that much feathers, So wood, steel, anything. Listen, if you're storing water or food or anything else, wrap yourself with that. And there's nothing like irradiating all of that food. It'll just keep it fresher longer, And it doesn't hurt the food. If you have a water container, for instance, and it's outside and the fallout is all over it, that water is perfectly fine. You need to dust it off and rinse it off before you bring it in, and be careful you don't have any of the fallout particles get it. but you pour that water out and use it, it's perfectly fine. I mean, the radiation went through it like you get an X-ray, you don't come out of there radioactive, right? Okay, so it's the same thing. So you could wrap this corner you're building can be wrapped with 50-gallon barrels of water, your food, ammo, anything that's got weight, go ahead and have it there. And it's so easy to do. And again, just suck it up. It's cramped and uncomfortable for 2 days, and you got a great story for the grandkids, and you'll be a survivor. I mean, that's all we're talking about here. I mean, it really is that simple. And FEMA's got some publications. Dirty little secret, I understand, though, is that they produced a lot of these without testing many of them. This particular one, I'm not impressed with the amount of shielding that they have here. But I like the lean-to idea. But I would go ahead and have a lot more heavy stuff here, rather than just going with that right there. We built these. We don't do them anymore, but it'll give you an idea of what you can do. This is road culvert. You can have anybody go ahead and weld these ends on here. Does this look familiar, Art? And anyways, 3 foot deep, and there's a bunch of people in one right there. And again, even just for the first 7 hours, to have it go from a lethal 1,000 Roentgen down to 100 Roentgen is worth it, you know? So anyways, we like the size of this because it would fit on a pickup truck, and we would just sell them. This is interesting. In August of 2010, DHS and FEMA invited proposals from emergency managers, federal, state, local governments, anybody any kind of stakeholder, on what they most need to do that would save the most lives. And they invited anybody to go ahead and submit proposals. They were put online, and then anybody could comment on them, and the comments were shown, and then anybody could vote on them, and vote on the one that they thought FEMA and DHS most needed to pursue. And then this was going to be taken to Congress and submitted to Congress, and it was also to get additional funding to make it happen. And then it was also going to go through all of these agencies to see if they could prioritize it. Anyways, the idea that we put through is what you've been hearing today. And in this, and it's a shortened version of the Good News article, and it talks about how easy it would be to train people, and we're not asking for billions for, provision fallout shelters like all the politicians have. We just want to train the people to duck and cover and shelter in place. Just very straightforward. But I got a little bit nasty in it, and I said towards the end that, and this was during the Obama administration, that if we have a nuke hit a city, the after-action report will show that 90% of the casualties were 100% avoidable if only the people had been pre-trained in what to do and not do. And that administration will have blood on its hands. And I don't understand why our government contracts have slowed up so much, but these things happen. Our idea out of, I think it was 236 different propositions, our idea won. It was number one. So, everybody got it. Jane, you commented on that for us, and Steve Jones and a lot of other people. We reached out to everybody. And if there's anybody here that commented on it too, I appreciate it if you remember it. So anyways, I'm thinking, oh man, we finally broke the log jam. I mean, we've made it. We're going to get civil defense turned back on again in this country. And again, I always made it a point that we're not talking about billions of dollars for fallout shelters and all. We're just talking the training. And how simple could that be? I mean, in 20 minutes, you could go ahead and teach this. So nothing happened. It went to Congress, and I didn't see any action. I didn't know how to find any action. And then we found that this story came out in USA Today in the middle of December. And I've pulled out just a few snippets. And this is the Obama administration, and I don't know if this is just CYA action on their part to be on record saying this stuff, but they're calling it a survivable event. And the media was kind of dumbfounded, like there's no nuclear news, there's no, where did this come from? And they said it's a survivable event. They're talking about sheltering in place. And they're talking about how the radioactivity dwindles. And stay in, stay safe, wait for instructions. You can't outrun a fallout cloud. And fatalities from fallout are 100% preventable. I mean, finally, they were saying it. So this was December 15th in USA Today, and this was talking about a dry run that they were doing over there. So, to their credit, they may have been moving in this direction already. I can't make the solid cause and effect of us winning, that competition there and then this stuff showing up. But then it also showed up the same day in the New York Times. And, which is, this is a big deal if they had then gone and taught everybody something, if they'd actually made it, where they got it into the schools and taught all of this again. But there's some more snippets from it again. Public education is the key. People are going to have to save themselves. The government is not going to miraculously show up when the flash happens in the sky. You're going to have to have known beforehand what it is you got to do and not do. So nothing more came of it. Sad to say, but maybe it's like turning the Titanic. But there are people that understand what's going on. We have seen that the Ready.gov site is starting to show some more of this. I'd like to see more duck and cover. They're very big on shelter in place, which is good because, as we talk to emergency managers, or you do, your local ones, it's not all what we've produced here. You can go ahead and point and find a lot of these same things are right in here. Now, again, because of people's prejudice, that still is in place. Everybody thinks if any nukes are unleashed, everybody's going to die or it'll be so bad you wish you had. That has not gone away. That's what we're always having to deal with. So most people aren't seeking this out. So what I would suggest is, if you can make some inroads with your local emergency managers, great. If you can't, be ready for a nuclear event somewhere in the world where all of a sudden they are interested. And you have to be ready to point them to the materials that they then can get in the newspaper or on the news, because they're going to have people coming to them saying, what do we do if a nuke went off here? Nukes are inevitable in our lifetime. If we live, for most of us living a reasonable lifetime, we're going to see a nuke fired in anger again. It's I wish it weren't true. I got kids, I got grandkids. But it's the cat's out of the bag, the horses out of the barn, all of those things. And we need to go ahead and deal with that. And if you have any ins with your local school, your school district, etc., how easy would it be to show them the Russian thing and what happened there? You could talk to them about, what if a meteor happened here? Do your teachers know to do this? And then that would apply for a bright flash from whatever the source is. So this is what we hope. Until the federal government takes the lead on it, we have to do whatever we can in our own communities to try to push it forward more. My time going?
Yeah, let's see. About 9.5 minutes.
Okay. Just to wrap up then. Anyways, there's no greater nor more legitimate primary responsibility of any government than to protect its citizens, and no greater condemnation awaits that government that fails to. risking millions then perishing needlessly. We all need to demand renewed public civil defense training, and the media needs to spotlight it by questioning officials and politicians until the government corrects this easily avoidable but fatal vulnerability. In the meantime, though, don't wait around for the government to protect you. If you go to goodnewsnuke.com, what you're going to find down near the bottom is you're going to find a link to what to do if a nuclear disaster is imminent. And that's a 12-page document we have that goes into even more details on how to do sheltering in place, how to go ahead and do all of the stuff that we've talked about. It'll give you more of the nuts and bolts of it to take it the next step. Then what I would suggest is the Good News article, post links to it or pass copies of it, the Good News article to friends, neighbors, relatives, fellow workers, churches, and community organizations with a brief note attached saying simply, "We hope and pray we never need this, but just in case, keep it handy." Few nowadays will find that approach alarmist, and you'll be pleasantly surprised at how many are truly grateful. Everyone should also forward copies to their local, state, and federal elected representatives, as well as your own community's first responders and local media, all to help spread this good news that's liberating American families from their paralyzing and potentially fatal myths of nuclear unsurvivability. Bottom line, we could easily reduce by 90% the lethality of all Chinese, Russian, North Korean, and Iranian missiles and any terrorist nukes too, quick as the public is trained up in blast and fallout civil defense basics again, and that is the very good news. Thank you.
Any questions?
I'm Joe Chinworth. I'm here from Utah.
Yes, sir.
And I'm wondering, what could each of us do when we get back to home to get some things going? What's your approach on that?
Read goodnewsnuke.com and see if you feel that it's a good tool to point other people to. And then whether it's, if you have any connections with media or school boards or your local emergency manager, your fire department, oftentimes is the same man, police department, any of these people, let's see if we can get them up to speed on it. And I would also keep in mind too that do what you can, but if you can't get it too far, understand, and we've seen this repeatedly, there might have to be something in the news first to get them all to put it on the top of the list. And if you're ready then to put it in their hands when they're ready to hear it, that might be what we have to do as well.
Following up on what I just asked, I'm a retired teacher from high school and 2 universities, and I would like to know what I could do to move things now. Do you have any ideas on that?
I would start with any of your numerous contacts that you have from that career, and I'd point them to the goodnewsnuke.com, and I would ask them their opinion. Say, hey, what do you think about this? So you're not coming in there trying to sell them hard on it or anything else. Just say, hey, what do you think about this? And then see if the dialogue can commence from that point.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet, thank you.
Mr. Connor, I believe your company produces, calibrates, and sells radiation detection equipment.
Yes, sir.
I believe on your website you had at one time posted a note that your most popular radiation meter was not available for the public because you sold too many or there were too many orders from the government. Are they available again? And maybe you could just generally say what are the products that are available?
Well, we're the only private radiation calibration lab in the country, non-government lab, that recalibrates and recertifies all of the old civil defense equipment, and we have a large inventory of them too. And people send us theirs, they get off eBay or elsewhere, and we've been doing that for quite a while. We also manufacture the Nuke Alert, the little keychain attachable one, and we had a bigger one that you're speaking of, the Nuke Alert ER that we were doing with the government.
That's the one I have.
Okay. Well, you're a fortunate man because it's out of production at this point.
But you still maintain and calibrate those,
Yes,
correct?
we are. Yes, we are. Yeah, we're supporting it. And
Why did you take that out of production, if I may ask?
so, about a year ago.
No, I mean, why did you take that?
We spent millions of dollars. We were working with the government. We had them set up as fallout reporting stations across the country. And we were producing numbers for FEMA and DHS, and we wanted one on every post office from coast to coast so we could track anything going on. And we spent millions of dollars and with promises of, you know, contracts and things that did not come through. I ran out of money. So.
Well, I live 30 miles from Omaha, and I don't know if we're still ground zero because of Stratcom or anything, but so 30 miles, let's say I live in a small town. How far, and in terms of like growing food and living, staying where you are, how far from a 50 kiloton weapon, maybe you can't answer that, but I'm just curious, how far, if you're 30 miles away from a major city and they get nuked, are you fine?
You're fine.
Okay.
You're absolutely fine. You really are. And now, again, you might be in that 1/8 where the wind that day was, you know, blowing the fallout your way. But we have a document on our website that was it was a government document, and we reproduced it, and it talks about protecting your farm, your ranch, your animals from fallout, and it's really quite fascinating, and it's still practical. I mean, you know, radiation effects and everything haven't changed, and so that's available on our website too. We good? Great. Thank you very much. Okay. You bet.